Welcome to the We Are for Good
How's it
podcast.
going?
It's going well. It's a very exciting day for us today because we literally have a living legend joining us today on the podcast from Arizona, but she's kind of a world traveler.
Yeah, until COVID, it took a pandemic to slow Lynn down.
Yes.
Because she was everywhere, literally everywhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, as she said, she lived 300 nights a year in a hotel room. And so for anyone out there that is saying, donor relations, what is that? Stewardship, I need to up my stewardship game. Today is your podcast because we have the donor relations guru in the house. We have been huge fans of Lynn's for years, been following her journey. She's just
a truth
like us.
talker.
She's a truth talker.
She uses real language.
I know.
Please
I'm going to tell a story
today.
about that, but I'm going to tell a story about that later on. But I want to give our listeners just a little bit of background on Lynn and the donor relations guru company. It's just so cool and innovative. And I'm not going to say a bad word, but it's bad ASS.
Bad
it's
A
so,
double dollar sign.
Bad A. I mean, it's just fantastic. So, so when I was reading Lynn's bio, here was the phrase that I endeared her to me forever. And she said, the first line says, if you ever imagine having cocktails with the love child of Mrs. Maisel and Dave Chappelle, then you have probably met Lynn Wester. And I love both of those shows / people. So that was fantastic for me. And I love the self-deprecating nature of that. So thank you very much. But Lynn is an accomplished professional. She is the president and CEO of Donor Relations Guru. And she is the one that's going to break down for us how stewardship is not what you think it is. And donor relations is much bigger than what we are all doing in our shops. And she's going to challenge that today. But she is just such a voice in this sector. And she's really one of the experts. She's regularly featured in the Washington Post, Chronicle of Philanthropy, Case. I mean, all of those top brass sort of periodicals and groups that are informing and educating all of us. And so she has done so much in the role in sort of the realm of not public relations, that's me, sorry, Lynn, in stewardship. And so I want her to start breaking down some of these pieces. But first, Lynn, welcome to the show. And just tell us a little bit about where you're from and your journey, because you were just like us, nestled in a nonprofit doing your fundraising, and you kind of transitioned into this like global stewardship powerhouse. So talk a little bit about that journey for us.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. And to all the listeners, buckle up. We're going to have some fun and some laughter. And also, hopefully, you'll learn a nugget or two. My background, I left a career at Walt Disney World and entered the higher education field because everybody wants to be a fundraiser when they grow up. Yeah. And so I went from small private university to large public universities all across the Southeast and Northeast. I ended up in New York City working at Yeshiva University. And while I was working, I also spoke and did some consulting on the side and really found my passion. I was the kind of kid that didn't know what I wanted to do my whole life other than be the first female NFL referee, but that required running.
Good for you.
Once I found out you had to run, I was like, yeah, that's a hard pass. So I'll just look at the cute boys in uniforms instead. So now I just watch eagerly and point out when they do bad things. So I ended up in fundraising and fell into donor relations from an attitude of gratitude that my leadership saw in me. And at the time, there were pioneers out there like Angie Jones and Debbie Myers and Maureen Donnelly and Mary Solomons. And I was like, I want to be that when I grow up. And so helped to develop the donor relations profession and have been preaching that donor relations gospel all over the world for the past 11 years heavy, but came right out of the field because I think it's important. One of the things that we pride ourselves on at Donor Relations Guru is that we are practitioners. We don't just give advice, we actually do the work because I feel like sometimes consultants can tend to get out of touch. And so we've been staying heavily in touch. Even though COVID grounded us, we are still working with clients. We are putting out as much content as we can put out to serve the changing landscape and the needs of our practitioners, and really helping people pivot through this new landscape while still maintaining the importance of donor relations. And now, it's awful to say that a pandemic has led to good things, but the emphasis on retention and donor relations has to be there for any fundraising shop that wants to survive.
Love it, Lynn. I mean, you've got such a interesting and amazing career so far. And I think something that we haven't talked about yet is that you've written books too. So I don't know where you find time to do all of this, but your latest book, The 4 Pillars of Donor Relations, I wonder if you would kind of explain what donor relations is, if this is a new topic, maybe through the lens of this book where you broke it into those pillars. I'd love to hear that.
Sure. Yeah, I've had the good fortune of authoring 4 books now. And honestly, people are like, when do you do that? Well, I don't sleep, but actually my writing process is kind of unique. I go and I usually find a place without TV and lock myself in a cabin with some Doritos and peanut butter. And last time I was in Isla Mirada, Florida, where the show Bloodline was filmed, and I wanted to go to that resort. And so I just locked myself in one of their cabins and wrote for 5 days, and out came the 4 pillars of the donor experience. My first book was The 4 Pillars of Donor Relations, which really laid out the fundamentals of our profession. And I find that donor relations is the kind of field where if you don't codify it, everything, we do everything but the ask. Mm-hmm. And that's what my first boss ever told me. I said, so what is this donor relations job you want me to do? And she's like, just do everything and then I'll ask for money. And I was like, okay, cool. But
that's a very simplistic view.
Yeah, I'm OCD, anal retentive, and I needed organization. So I realized frustratingly that people were simplifying my profession down into one thing, and that was stewardship. And stewardship and donor relations actually aren't interchangeable. And I think that's a knowledge I've been bringing to the fundraising world for about 15 years now, because stewardship is one of the 4 pillars. So we have acknowledgement, stewardship, recognition, and engagement. And acknowledgement and stewardship are how we accept the gift, that we send our tax receipts, our thank yous, our gift acceptance policies, all that good, dry, fun, sexy stuff, and then stewardship really is to tell a donor what you did with their money, how we spent it, that we spent it according to donor intent, and then reporting back on that impact. And the intricacies of stewardship often get overlooked in the hard labor because it's not pretty and it's not sexy. But if you don't do stewardship, you end up with unspent funds, unhappy donors, and losing them in spades. And, Penelope Burke, who's written Donor-Centered Fundraising, who I admire greatly, 85% of donors don't actually know what their money did, according to her research.
Tragic. Wow. That is a really tragic stat.
Well, if you think about your own personal giving and say you give $50 to your alma mater or $50 to a cause, just to their unrestricted support, how many times do they report back to you what your $50 did? And it's the organizations that do that are going to rise. Organizations like World Central Kitchen, Charity Water, Team Rubicon, they're eating universities for lunch, honestly, because when I give $50 to World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres says, hey, we fed 24 people today with your $50 and we couldn't do it without you. When I give that same $50 to Prestigious You, they go, thanks so much.
It's just it's a staggering difference. And I mean, and the thing is, and not to just pick on universities, because I think there's everybody, like there are these pockets of nonprofits across the sector. It's like, if we could just say, this is the linchpin, people. This is it right here. This is the key to retention and to bigger and better gifts. Is all you have to do is this tiny little thing in here. We know it's not tiny because we know it requires a ton of hustle and a ton of fortitude and focus. But that is the thing that does transform. And so I really appreciate that you're bringing this out and sort of giving it front and center stage, sort of a profile and a spotlight, because it is the thing that we have got to do better at. And I have noticed just this sort of genesis of what you've started 10 years ago. And now, I mean, if you go to the donor relations conference now, I mean, we've been a couple times. It is massive, and you find pockets of nonprofits that have huge donor relations staffs now, and what they are able to accomplish and how they are able to translate the impact of the mission is, I mean, and it's leading just a culture of philanthropy at those institutions where everything seems like it's more harmonious. Everybody's ticking on one level. I mean, I would love for you to talk about if you have any examples of organizations that you've seen that have sort of employed this early on and where they are now, those that have really leaned into it.
Sure. You know, and it seems basic, right? Okay, so we should thank donors and tell them what their money did. Then how come more organizations aren't excellent at it if it's so simple? And we know that it's not simple. It requires talking to beneficiaries. It requires talking to administrators and saying, what did you spend the money on? And it's okay if you spent the money on non-sexy stuff, right? Like, it's totally okay. But it also requires the finesse and how to storytell. And not all of us are trained storytellers. And how do you make, you know, the funding of a beaker sound wonderful? Or how do you make the hiring of a case manager sound great? And so we work really hard in that. Shops that leaned into donor relations, I would say the revolution really happened in the last economic downturn of 08-09. Because during an economic downturn, it's 7 times, and anytime it's 7 times cheaper to keep the donor you have than it is to go and acquire a new one. So retention is actually economically smart. And so shops like Brigham and Women's went from 10 in donor relations to 30 in donor relations. In fact, over the last decade, we have been one of the biggest moving positions in terms of hiring. Us and social media basically are the two branches that are getting hired over and over again, because we realize that our frontline gift officers' lifespan is about 16 months at an organization. They turn over every 16 months. But a donor relations professional is there for much longer. And the relationship with the donor at a university is 60 to 80 years, for example. And so you need someone who's going to tend to that relationship and do the fundamentals. You know, the other two pillars of recognition and engagement, that seems to be where everybody likes to spend their time. They want giving societies and they want events, although pre-COVID, and they want all this top donor engagement and they want, you know, lapel pins and fancy crap. But if you don't award a donor scholarship, you can flush all that down the toilet. You know, I often liken it, because I'm a Steel Magnolias fan, to buying a really nice dress and not having on the proper undergarments. So it's like two pigs dancing under a blanket, as Dolly Parton would say. You know, she hasn't left this house without Lycra on her thighs since she was 15. So I encourage everybody to get their Spanx on, or whatever undergarment you get. And because you can do everything in the world for a donor, but if you don't spend their money, and if you don't tell them what you did with it to make them proud and tell them that you need them, there's no point. There's just, the point is moot and the relationship is broken. And we can say you can get back that trust, but it's never the same.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you know, Becky and I, in our experience too, have just seen, and Julie too, it's always like you want it to appear simple to the donor, even though it could be the most complex, ridiculous on the back end to actually get things in motion, moving. And I think it speaks to the collaboration and so many people working it on the back end. I wonder, would you talk, Lynn, for those that are sitting there and they, you know, it's somebody in the nonprofit that wants to make this change in their area and wants to uprise and say, we want to do a better job at this. Where do you start? Because it's not just one person's job, right? It's taking the team effort. So what would you advise somebody to start, how to start?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I remember when I first got into fundraising, they would say, everybody's a fundraiser. And I'm like, all right, well, I believe everybody's in donor relations. And the difference and what sets us apart is the donor experience. And if we look at for-profit business, those businesses that have great customer experiences, Ritz-Carlton, Disney, Starbucks, Amazon, Zappos, they don't have a better product. Like, some might say Starbucks' coffee is even worse than other people's. I don't drink coffee, so I don't know. But they have a better experience. And what I'm encouraging shops who want to take the path to this is first assess your donor experience. Go make a gift online. If you can't do it on your phone in under 30 seconds, if you're making it hard for me to give you money, if you're constantly defaulting to whatever is stock or whatever, if you're not putting effort, if your communications don't give you joy when you read them, don't send them. You know, if you're not constantly thinking at every step about the donor experience, and you're right, donors have no idea what goes into pulling off some of their reports, some of their surprises, some of the things I've done. But the art of donor relations, the true donor relations professional, is a lot like a duck or a swan or some other waterfowl in that above water, looking awesome, neck up, like underwater, paddling like hell. So just hiding the turd and paddling and pretending like nothing is wrong, even though your tent is on fire and the caterer ran out of shrimp. And, you know, the student is wearing unacceptable clothing. You are just whipping a black sweater out of your purse, you know, putting some baby powder on the fire. You know, you just found some shrimp in your trunk of your car, and you are just solving problems.
I feel like I can just see this happening. It reminds me of that scene in The Wedding Planner with Jennifer Lopez just pulling out things before the wedding. That is exactly the greatest analogy. That is the greatest analogy for what we have to do sometimes in this sector.
And we're doing it with one of those really smiles on our face, like,
we're doing it. Log on to YouTube. We're making an extreme smile.
My favorite smile is the one when the guest shows up an hour and a half before the event.
Oh, gosh.
You're still in your t-shirt and yoga pants trying to set stuff up. You're sweating. You smell like a goat. And they're like, hi. And you're like, we're so happy to have you. Welcome.
Pull up a chair.
Yeah. So, oh my God, you're here 6 hours early. And so, you know, we have to be prepared, but it is those, and I think people underestimate the fundamentals. They underestimate what it takes, for example, to get a finance person to tell you what is in the books, or to get a tenured professor to do anything, but also give you 10 minutes of their time to tell you how they spent their money, or the finesse of talking to a scholarship recipient who might be scared to meet their donor, or, you know, reassuring people that what we're doing is the right thing, even though, you know, it may be difficult at first. And that all of that falls into the Swiss Army life, you know, the Swiss Army knife life of a donor relations professional, is to make it seem effortless. But I think one of the things that I would like to see change, and one of the things I've always been preaching about, is we can't be silent martyrs. We have to be strategic partners. And when I got into donor relations, it was a lot of lovely ladies that wrote beautiful handwritten thank you notes and could tie a bow. And I admire the people that can tie a bow, because I can't. And we know where to get anything in the world monogrammed. I mean, you ask a donor relations professional, we can get it monogrammed or framed, and we've got a guy for that. True. It's so true. Oh, I mean, I'm looking at my bag that my friend Sarah Sims got me with my monogram on it.
Oh,
and
I
my
love
Sarah. My customized cup that Jan McGuire got me. And like, you know, we're the best gift givers, but we aren't always strategic partners. And I am pushing us in our profession to not tamp down the nice, but to level up our strategic game so that we can be at the table with our major gift officers, principal gifts, vice presidents, and bring strategy, not just the here's what I'd like to do, but here's why we need to do that.
I think that's a huge takeaway for anyone listening. Is I think if we were thinking of old thinking in terms of the way that donor relations and stewardship have been implemented, I mean, stewardship is very much a strategic thing. Donor relations is a strategy. And if before it was this very tactically driven process, I mean, now the gift is important, but we don't live and die on the gift, because it's just one step in a series of many steps that we're leading a donor through. And that to me is the whole process of discovery and cultivation and normalizing retention, because they're just used to hearing from you. And the other thing I want to lift out that I really appreciate about the donor relations guru, you specifically and your team, is just this ethical storytelling and telling it like it is. I mean, I just think we talk about this a lot in the podcast and with our company, is we don't need to just Norman Rockwell this scenario that we're living in. You talk about, how do you make a beaker that somebody bought? How do you make that sexy? You cannot in some ways. If you can, bravo to you. But it's like, I mean, why not say to a donor, thank you so much for your gift that purchased these beakers. I know it's not, the most incredibly inspirational or impactful gift, but here is why it matters. If we didn't have this, then we can't get to this really big end product. So your gift is leading to the bigger, greater impact. Thank you for being, one of our little soldiers in the army, or maybe not little, but we don't want them to feel little. But I really appreciate that. And I have like a little story I want to tell about Lynn about that. She probably doesn't remember this at all, but we were, there was a donor relations summit in Oklahoma City several years ago that we attended, and it brought in all these donor relations, stewardship professionals from around the country. And I was sitting on a panel with these two CEOs having major imposter syndrome, because I was not a CEO and not even close to it. And we're sitting there talking through ways that we're trying to innovate the industry. And I don't even remember exactly what the question was. This is my first time to interact with Lynn, by the way, who is sitting in the audience. I totally know who she is because she's already a rising star even years ago. And I say something about, and it's in the vein of just what we believe, John and I believe, and it's like that ethical storytelling. Quit using stock photography. Like, we need to use we need to be authentic storytellers, and that's not just with our words. It's like in every part of what we do. And I am talking about the impact of not using stock photography. And from the back of the room, someone breaks out into the most raucous applause. And I'm not telling the story to be like, oh, Becky is just so brilliant and has these amazing nuggets, but it was so jarring to me. And I looked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, Lynn is clapping and leading this applause, because this is what she is preaching. And this is the sort of tiny little nugget that we need to start sowing in our business, because we want to be authentic. We want to be genuine. You have been sitting on this hill for a really long time trying to preach this. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that storytelling, that ethical storytelling, and how you've been able to see that moving with the way that you've been coaching some of your clients and some of these nonprofits.
I probably was applauding because somebody was trying to be honest on a panel, which usually never happens. Like, panels are the Instagram of conferences. Everybody just puts forward their pretty face and like their house looks perfect and nothing's on fire. And I'm like, you people need to start telling the truth. I know about the fire in your backyard, So.
Oh, sister, look at my 3-day hair right now. I feel you.
Because no one that looks like me is ever in stock photography. I am so sick of skinny white people. Like, and they're all perfectly polished and
coiffed. Like, yes.
Yeah, they're
lighting's great.
Duck face.
I remember I was reviewing, I have the privilege of doing work with a battered women and children's shelter in Naples, Florida. And unfortunately, we have to use stock photography to protect the women and children. And
that will be an asterisk on that. Totally doable.
Right. Yeah, we were reviewing photographs and I was like, all right, we can't use this one. And they're like, it's perfect. And I'm like, she's got on an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, not that a victim of domestic violence wouldn't, but like, it just looks, she's so perfect. Her nails are done, her Apple Watch. And I'm like, the women that come in here don't always look like that. So we need to represent them honestly. And so I think for me, storytelling with integrity is about honesty. It's about non-exploitation. of the people who we are helping. And I think it's also about not thinking that our donors are stupid. And what I say by that harsh word is, if I give $50 to a food bank, I didn't fix Julie's whole life. Like, I did not solve all her problems. Julie may still have 6 kids, working 2 jobs, living out of her car and couch surfing. Her kid may still have an intellectual learning disability. She may still be grappling with food insecurity. I'm not the great white savior of Julie's life. I just made it so that she could have a hot meal that day. I didn't fix everything. And I think we in nonprofit land love saying, your $100 transforms Becky. And I'm like, not really, and some of our medical charities are the worst at this. I once got, I gave a gift to the largest medical charity out there, which will remain unnamed, but you can email me and I'll tell you who it is. And they said, your $15 saved Reagan's life. And there in the upper right-hand corner was Reagan, and she had lost her hair from chemotherapy, and she was experiencing cancer there at the center. And I'm like, my $15 didn't buy Reagan a Band-Aid. So don't tell me I saved her life. It's inauthentic. Like, my $15 combined with others may have made a difference in her treatment, or may have made it affordable for her parents to stay there while she was getting treated. But it sure as hell didn't save her life. And so I hate that inauthenticity, or that a college scholarship transforms a student. The student did the hard work to get there as well. We're not the only people that are involved in this educational process. It takes a village, it takes a community. And so these grand claims, or, the other one that really chaps my hide is time is running out. At the end of a fiscal year, at the end of a calendar year, time's running out. Deadline is December 31st. So you're telling me you won't take my money January 2nd?
You're going to hold back your lapel pin from me.
Right. Yeah. And Jonathan, let me tell you, if I don't get a lapel pin, I don't give.
Said nobody ever, anywhere.
Ever. Because I don't even have a lapel. I have on a Target dress.
Especially in COVID. That's not weathered well.
I have on a Target dress, let's be honest.
I have on a Target shirt. Hey, thank you, Target.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to sponsor us, Target, just email me.
Yeah.
So Lynn, you're talking about donor experience and kind of comparing it to some of these big corporate players. I feel like it's worth noting to say, even though we like to live in our separate worlds, that's not the reality. Our donors expecting that because they press buy and it arrives at their door. And so even though we don't have the resources to do those kind of things immediately, we have to think of how are we building that kind of an experience, because that's their expectation and that's not going to change. So I wonder, you wrote a whole book on donor experience. Can you give us just where's the future going with that? Where are we headed as an industry?
Sure. We may not have the ability to deliver like Amazon. Like when I live in Austin and I'm there, I swear one day I was so lazy that I wanted popcorn, but there's like a little grocer 2 blocks away from my apartment. And I was like, they have my popcorn. I ordered it on Amazon and 3 hours later it was at my door. And I was like, that is the ultimate in laziness. But they're so efficient, right? Yeah. But here's the key about Amazon. It's not that they deliver it within 2 minutes of you ordering it, or that, it comes in a box way larger than anything you need, but is great for packing. It is that they know who you are. And that's the first pillar of the donor experience is intelligence and knowledge of the donor. So they know that I eat popcorn, so they suggest other kinds of popcorn. They don't say, do you want jelly beans? They say, she likes salty snacks. Let's give her some Doritos and some Cheetos. And in donor relations and in fundraising, we go, Julie gave $500 to library, but she graduated from engineering. So we're going to keep soliciting her for engineering, even though she gave to the library. And Julie's like, I'm giving to the library. I'm giving to the library. And engineering is like, we're getting rid of all the books in our department. Come support us. And Julie's like, but I gave to the library and I like books. But because she went to engineering undergrad and made that decision when she was 18 years old, we stick that moniker on her for the rest of her life. So we actually ignore data intelligence. And what I'm suggesting in the donor experience is we may never be able to get to the height of an Amazon or a Zappos, but I should know what Julie likes to experience. I should know what kind of industry she's in. I should know whether, one of my favorite things is the awkward moment at conferences when I tell people I haven't had caffeine in 15 years, because they're like, we don't want her to have caffeine, because can you imagine this on caffeine? And then they realize that their speaker gift they're giving me is a Starbucks gift card. And I'm like, that's awkward. You know what I mean? Like,
go get a free mug.
Yeah, I collect glasses and fancy water at this point. But, like I buy friends treats. I actually give the gift cards to flight attendants. They're very happy about that.
Oh, that's nice.
So I get a good dose of alcohol on my plane. But it's not knowing, and it's knowing but ignoring the signs. So, gone are the days where you keep the same job your whole life. Just because you majored in something doesn't mean you do that anymore. Did you guys major in podcast hosting undergraduate?
Nope.
Because
didn't even exist when I was there. So there you have
it. What the hell was a podcast? Right. So we need to gather intelligence and then use it. And it's there. We just aren't listening. And those companies listen. They might listen creepily. Like if Alexa, you start talking, later today, there's going to be an ad that appears on my phone that is for popcorn. You know what I mean? But that's okay. So I just think we have to listen, and then we have to act based on what we learn about people. People are creatures of habit. So the likelihood that Julie, my library donor, is going to switch over to engineering is slim to none.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great example too, because I think those donors exist in even the most high performing shops, we know. And I think if anyone's, tuning in today, one of the key takeaways is we've just got to listen and lean in, and data is powerful, and we all hate to go into data. We love our prospect researchers, and because they're helping us flesh that out, because quantitative and qualitative analysis is key in this sector. But you're right. I mean, just listening is such a key core. And I think one of the greatest gifts that you give, Lynn, is just understanding how to build a robust donor pipeline. Can you walk our listeners through some of the key steps to building just that pipeline so that it's moving and living and breathing?
And you're right. Data is the key to everything. And data makes us more strategic. Angie Jones, who's the assistant vice chancellor at UC Davis and my bestie, she has hired 2 data analysts for donor relations. That is where we are headed as a profession. But when you build, and I don't even like to call it a pipeline more than a funnel, because a pipeline's one shape and stays the same, and there's no in and out there. But the way we've thought about it, I believe, is fundamentally flawed. And so I ask people to open their minds a little. So I'm going to ask everybody on this podcast to open their mind a little and bless and release the way they've been valuing their donors. So traditionally, we value donors based on the amount of money they give our organization. A $50 donor is worth less to us, quote unquote, than a $5,000 donor. And we even call them things like major donors and lower level donors, which I'm like, I aspire to be somebody's lower level donor one day, said no one ever, right? And we have departments called major gifts. So who's in charge of minor gifts? Like, who's my minor gift officer? And these terms are so pejorative. They're based on amount. I believe the future of fundraising is based on donor behavior, not amount. That a loyal donor of $50 a year for 22 years is more valuable to our organization than a one-time donor of $100,000. That a donor who doubles their gift from $100 to $250 deserves a visit more than a donor who gives $5,000 a year and has never changed. And that we as a profession have to look at behaviors, monthly givers, digital versus analog, because people who give online are very different than people who write checks, but we treat them the same. People who give to crowdfunding or project-based fundraising is different than somebody who gives to your annual fund. One pot that I have been exploring deeply in the COVID-19 times are donors who give through DAFs or donor advised funds. There are tens of billions of dollars sitting in Fidelity and, all the charitable donor advised funds. That money's already been given. It is our job during tough economic times to go get it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't require the donor to do anything but fill out an online form. Those things should be emptied by the time this pandemic is over, whether it be for racial and social justice, whether it be for COVID-19 relief, whether it be to help budgets that are affected, help keep our YMCAs open, whatever it be. That is a behavior. So if I have a donor advised fund, understand that's a huge indicator, because if I have a donor advised fund, it also means I have a financial advisor, which means I have a different sophistication level of wealth than someone who writes a $50 check maybe, or somebody who gives $50 on their, same thing. I'd be digging into people who give via American Express more than people who give via Discover. Two different kinds of people.
Yep.
And we need to look into this. I don't give a crap if the gift is $25 or $25,000. We have to stop measuring people's worth based on that, because here's what we know. High net worth individuals in America give 1.3% of their worth away. 1.3%. Those beneath the poverty line, those that make less than $19,900 in the United States, give 3.7% of their worth away. Wow. So the poorer you are in America, according to finances, the more generous you are. But in our industry, we laud the big donors. We do the big checks, god awful big checks, the Happy Gilmore.
The big checks.
I freaking want to blow those things up, right? But we never say, here's Maud. Maud's been giving 54 years consecutively. Maud's a bigger hero than Joe, who just had his IPO and gives us $100,000, right? Because Maud's there when we have good leadership, when we have bad leadership. For those of us in the South, when we win on the field, when we lose on the field, Maud's there. Joe doesn't want to have anything to do with us if we have a 3-game win season, And so we need to think about worth and what we really value in human beings, because generosity is what we should be valuing.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Everything, Lynn just hit our top 3 core principles as a company, right in, and here for anyone listening, here's the Cliff's Notes version of what you need to get out of this podcast. We need to be looking at behavior rather than valuing amount. I mean, if that is the cog of this entire discussion, I think that's it. And for us and our ethos, I mean, our number one core tenet and value is that everyone matters. And you have to start thinking about, how does everyone matter? Because we believe that community and coupling a lot of these very tiny gifts can actually move mountains. And these are people that are wholly invested in our mission. They are rabid fans of what we want to do, and they want to do good. They want to be an ambassador for us. And those are the people we need to be grabbing, because they're not only going to change our organization, they're going to change the world with their passion. And so I hate to be too Pollyanna about it, but I just think that you have hit on something that is so important here. And Julie, I know you had a comment that you were going to jump in and kind of ask a question. So go for it.
Yeah, I have a question. So my heart's beating kind of fast for the really small shop nonprofit as I'm listening to all of this wisdom, and maybe it's my age. Could you just have one piece of advice of where someone might start if they're a team of 5, a team of 4 that maybe don't have the means or the resources to hire a donor relations person, or look really far into all the nitty-gritty of the donor experience? What's the number one thing they could do when this podcast is done to move towards this?
So I think I love my small shop heroes. I started as a shop of 1, so I really think those folks are where it's at. The first thing I would say is analyze your gratitude process and make sure your thank you to ask ratio is in proportion. Making sure you're not asking too much and they're getting a proper thank you and impact experience. So that's step 1. Also have your board. So your board, we all know that boards hate to fundraise, right? When we bring up fundraising, they all flip out and disappear at the board meeting. But boards are amazing at 2 things: criticism and gratitude. So we're going to put both of those things to work. So I have my board members give $5 gifts to nonprofits, and then we compare what they get back. So they're my secret shoppers. My board
I've seen you do this in the past, and I am obsessed with it. Yes.
So cool.
So they secret shop. And then my board members start every board meeting by writing 5 handwritten notes to donors. So employ your volunteers as gratitude folks. So those are 2 really simple steps, very affordable things that anybody can do. And then if you want to take a big step, I want you to find all of your donors who've been giving to you for half or more years you've been in existence, because a lot of my small shops are newer shops. So maybe you've been in existence 22 years. Go and find any donor who's given to you 11 years or more. And I don't care if you have to throw them a parade, not in COVID times, masked and 6 feet apart.
Drive-by parade.
But
yeah.
I want you to love on any, so find your loyal donors, start talking to them, ask them why they're giving, ask them what would make them leave. And start loving on your loyal donors. Leave your, bless and release your big donors for a time being. They get enough love. I promise you, they get lauded on by everybody and their mother. But start looking at your loyal donors first. And that's a really easy pull for most people. You can pull it out of your database. It doesn't take a lot of effort. But those are, so 1, 2, 3. 1, make sure that you've got a good gratitude experience and that you can say when you go to bed at night, most of my donors know where their money went. That's a good one. Number 2, and that we're not asking people for money all the time, because that is not our key role, right? Number 2, get your board involved. Have them out there secret shopping and giving gratitude. And they will love criticizing organizations. They get into it. They're like, can you believe this? And you're like, so we don't want to do that. So we might need some resources so that we don't have to do that, because right now that may be all we can do. And then the resources unlock because they understand, right? And they bring in the pieces and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe this, And I always have them shop at peer institutions and organizations, but also the ones they think are fancy and big and nice. They are shocked by the way they treat a lowly old $5 donor.
Interesting.
Lynn, you're just throwing so much actionable.
I feel like my mind
so
is exploding with all of the great nuggets that are here.
Like those watermelons that people are putting rubber bands around. That's kind of cool.
I don't know about this. Is this on?
Okay,
oh yeah.
I'm feeling very uncultured.
It's hilarious. This could be a virtual, an ice bucket challenge kind of a something. How can we figure out how to tie a mission to the watermelon rubber band challenge? That is a challenge for you out there.
Wear goggles. That's all I would say.
Lynn, I wonder if you've got a story. I'm sure you've got 100 stories, but what's a story of when you saw philanthropy come full circle, or maybe that donor relations really did something really impactful that stuck with you?
It's a personal one. So
the best.
I didn't know what to get my parents for their 50th wedding anniversary. So I got them a scholarship at my alma mater, and I had gone to their alma maters and not had a successful experience trying to give them money.
Wow. Interesting.
Long story, but I ended up giving money to my alma mater, and a woman named Carrie Henderson in the donor relations department knew how big of a stretch this gift was for me. I even had to do part of it blended with a planned gift because I didn't have that kind of cash. I was working in the nonprofit field. I was just starting my consulting and speaking, and it was really a stretch to scrap together this money. And so I said, if I could have something my parents could open on their anniversary, because I was living in New York City, they were in Georgia. And so she created this cute little certificate that said, your daughter got you a student, basically, for your
that's adorable.
Awesome.
And I Skyped with them and watched them open it. By the way, what happened to Skype? They had such the advantage of doing it over,
Gotta innovate. You gotta keep innovating.
Zoom killed them. It's like Nokia. What happened? Sorry, squirrel. So my parents opened the present. My dad cried. My mom was thrilled and everything. And then they were very grateful. And then later that afternoon, Harris Pastides, who was the 11th president of the University of South Carolina, called my parents and wished them a happy anniversary.
Oh my goodness.
He called their home. They had a landline. They still do, because that's how they roll. And he called their home and said, we're so grateful to you for raising a daughter like this. And I'm like, oh, more. Wish them a happy anniversary. And just, my mom was over the moon. And he said, is there anything I can do for you? So my mom conned him into giving her football tickets so she could go to a game, but that's a whole nother issue. And that was so moving to me. Every year for the last 9 years on my parents' wedding anniversary, Harris Pastides called my parents. And I know somebody in donor relations made that happen. And make my parents happy, I'll give you all the money I have. I've since paid off the scholarship plus some. All my books and all my consulting earnings for a while went into it. And every year he would call them, to the point that, now my parents are in their 80s, so they don't have much going on, but they would wait around the house and until he called. And like, I would call and be like, happy anniversary. My mom would go, the president may be calling. I need to cut this short.
Oh.
And he would call and he would wish them happy anniversary. And it was like the highlight. Like, they didn't go get the mail. They didn't want to talk to anybody. They waited around the house until he called. We have a new president. He's never called my parents the last 2 years. It breaks my heart, but my mom understands that he was a special man and there was a special person. And Carrie doesn't work in donor. She retired. And so, but that magic of the fact that somebody took, I mean, it was 4 minutes, 5 minutes when my mom got talking, but you know, it was 2 minutes out of his day and it made their whole year, you know. And whenever we would go to campus, we would meet our scholarship recipient and go to his little tailgate. And he would always either look at their name tags or remember their names. I don't care which, but it made them so happy. And I can't say that it's the same anymore. They still get wonderful treatment from other folks. They don't get it from the president. He's not that kind of a dude, I don't think. And so I miss that. And but that's a personal, that somebody went out of their way every year to make sure that happened.
And all because, sorry, I got to make this a full circle. Somebody within that foundation had the presence of mind to know who you were and to know what this meant to you, and to automate, I mean, almost to go above and beyond to automate this process. And it is something that has clearly so richly enhanced your life, enhanced your parents' life. The connectivity to your alma mater is probably like off the charts.
It is.
And I mean, that's such a good takeaway for everyone. We can all do something that's so tiny that takes 2 to 4 minutes a year that can transform the relationship and the connectivity that we have with our donors. Fantastic story.
And understanding that for me, the stewardship was never to me. The donor relation should have never been to me. That taking care of my parents is what takes care of me. Do you know what I mean?
And she got it. She totally got it.
There's no coffee mug. There's no
lapel pin.
There's no lapel pin that will ever be that. You know what I mean? Now, my dad does like the free hot dogs in the football suite, but because it's the only time of year he gets to have a hot dog. But I mean, you know,
it's the little things in life, right? That's exactly it. Well, Lynn, you have so many incredible nuggets that you've given us today. I mean, I just feel like I have learned and grown so much in this conversation. We ask all of our guests as the last question, what is your one good thing that you could share with our audience today? What is something that could be a simple hack, a word of advice, something that they could do today to just put goodness out in the world? Do you have something like that you could offer?
Absolutely. So first, I'd like to say thank you. To me, one good thing is when people share each other's messages and we lift each other up in this profession, because we're all good people trying to do good things out in the world. So you don't get into this profession for the money, the glory, or the fame. You do it because you have a reason. My good thing is literally, I just grabbed it and brought it over to me, is this. So wherever I go around the world, I always carry with me note cards. These are the ones my assistant Shannon got me. They're very fancy, but I also carry funny ones like sloth note cards.
Do I see a Sesame Street one? You need to log on to YouTube right now and look at this.
Sesame Street stamps.
I love Sesame Street.
Oh, nice.
Or I have Wonder Woman stamps, but I always, no matter what, carry with me my gratitude kit. This is my gratitude kit. It means that no matter where I go, I can give gratitude. No matter what I'm doing, I write notes in planes. I write notes all over the place. In fact, I'm leaving my community soon, and I have notes ready to go for everybody who's
she's already written them. They're labeled.
Or done anything nice for me while I've been here these 3 months. And so when I leave, I'll put these in the blue box on the way out the door, so that by the time I'm gone, they'll have something to remember me by and a little note of gratitude. That is these notes, these handwritten notes, They have gotten me further in my life than anything else, just by writing handwritten notes. And they're the most precious things I keep, are my handwritten notes from other people. I've never thrown one away. So I have them from early on in my career. I have every single note I've ever received. So that's my hack, is sometimes you just got to say, how's it hanging?
With a sloth on a branch.
Or during the pandemic, you got to tell people to hang in there.
Hang in there.
That is so awesome.
That is such a good hack.
We
and
can all
look,
do that.
I want to be I'm a letter writer too. I'm holding up my note cards that I have in my bag as well, because John and Julie know that writing letters is my love language to people. Yep. So great hack.
Thanks.
Lynn, so you are everywhere, basically. If people are on social media, they can find you and Donor Relations Group. But I wanted to share, I know you've got a fall fundamentals series that's happening. Y'all are doing some awesome DEI training every third Wednesday of the month. So we'd love to encourage listeners to go there. But can you just tell, where does DRG like to hang out online? Where can people connect with you?
You can get us on every channel at Donor Guru. That's Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram some days. But our website is donorrelationsguru.com. We have over 16,000 downloads for free that are samples from other nonprofits, like thank you cards and impact reports. We want to be a resource for you to do your work. Sometimes copying and stealing is the best thing you can do, so we want to enable that for you. But we do. We have a huge COVID-19 page with resources on it. That was the first thing I pulled together, is what can I do to help people? We have a huge DE&I page. DE&I is one of my passions. My minor at the university was African-American studies, so I'm very passionate about equity and inclusion. We have to come back, and we should do a whole podcast on, how we can make giving societies more equitable and inclusive. So
I love that topic.
Love that.
Excellent.
And then we have webinars. They're affordable. Your whole team can come. You don't have to buy separate licenses. So, they're very affordable, and we bring content to you that you want. And so we are here to help. If you need us, you can email us, and we usually get back to you, same day, if not next day, with any questions. We're kind of your butterball hotline of fundraising. So try to help people out in a pinch. We do a weekly Facebook Live to try to help people out. So we are here to give generously back to our community, because the work you do is so important, and we're here to support that.
I love it. Thank you for being just sort of the North Star in the donor relations and stewardship world. I think globally, we just think of you as being one of those experts that is just like us. We're trying to value people. We're trying to bring missions front and center and cut out the white noise. We just want the impact to be front and center. So thank you to you and your incredible team for all that you do. And we definitely got to have you on again.
Thank you,
Well,
Lynn.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. And if you need anything at all, you let us know.
Thanks, Lynn.